And hello, I'm Dr. James Kelly, one of the medical science liaisons for L-Nutra, the makers of Prolon, the 5-day fasting mimicking diet. We're going to talk today a little bit about why fasting is beneficial, why you need to do it for several days, how you can mimic that with food, and then what are some of the clinical results of some of the studies we've done, and finally, integration into your practice, things to worry about, look out for, and things to improve the experience. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get started. So we should first clarify that this is not designed to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. We limit our claims to weight loss, healthy aging, and metabolic balance. So please bear that in mind. If you want to use this with a client that has some sort of medical condition, we encourage you to practice within the scope of your license and use your clinical judgment to determine whether they're healthy enough and safe enough for a 5-day fasting mimicking diet. So we'll go over a little bit about what we are concerned about, but in general, that's our standard disclaimer. The first and most obvious question when you talk about a fasting mimicking diet is, why would you want to fast? Why do you want to mimic a fast? What is it about fasting that's beneficial? Well, fasting is part of all of our evolution. In the same way that your body responds to any other threat, we've evolved careful mechanisms to respond to the threat of a lack of nutrition. So when you run out of food, that's a threat to the body, and the body has to respond to protect itself. And it does so in a variety of ways, including improving how efficiently it uses energy, how well the cells are able to act more like their younger selves, as well as some other benefits. It's been with us through all of time. We used to run out of food quite a bit, or I wasn't there, but this evidence tends to suggest that that's how we evolved, is that we were facing starvation very frequently during the lean times, punctuated by brief periods of plenty. All cultures, all time had to deal with this. Fasting has been still practiced by all major religions. But recently we've invented farming and refrigeration, grocery stores, and fast food. So now we have continuous, uninterrupted daily food intake. So we never access this mechanism of fasting that's built into every cell in the body. But fortunately for all of humanity, the idea of fasting has returned, and with it, many of the benefits. It's actually the most popular diet followed in the US 2 out of the last 3 years. Intermittent fasting in particular, time-restricted eating, partly because it's easy to sustain, and also because there are a number of benefits. So there's also major clinical research going on around this. If you go on to clinicaltrials.gov and search the word fasting, you'll find over 13,000 clinical trials with the word fasting in their title right now. We've done dozens, we have dozens more planned. Today, we're just going to talk about our general wellness trials that are focused around healthy individuals doing the diet a number of times. But what is it? It's important to define because a lot of people don't quite get it. A lot of people will say that they are doing juice fast or something like that, which is true. That's the abstinence from solid food, but it's not truly fasting. At a biological level, the physiologic changes that occur during fasting, your body switches from burning external fuel from the outside world, food that you're eating, to burning its internal stored energy in the form of fatty acids, ketones, glycerin, glycogen, and other energy sources. So it's the switch from outside to inside fuel. That's the kind of the physiologic definition. But what we're interested in is how that occurs. What is the signal that leads to that switch? The change in your nutrient sensing pathways. And we'll talk a lot about those and what this does to the cells, turning on this stress resistant state. So in order to understand why that we are 5 days, there's a couple of things you need to know about fasting. And one of them is how the body goes into fasting. If you look here on this chart, what we're showing here is that you still have about 12 hours of glucose from your last meal. So in phase 1 of fasting, which is the first about day, 12 to 24 hours, you're burning the fuel that's left from the food, and you're just starting to switch into a fasting state. Ketones like beta hydroxybutyrate are just starting to appear, but they don't really, you don't reach what they call physiologic ketosis until about end of day 2, beginning of day 3. In the interim, while your body's waiting for those ketones to appear, you are going to be cannibalizing other energy sources like glycerin in your liver, glycogen in your liver and muscles, and amino acids in your muscles. Your body can actually turn amino acids into energy very easily, but in the first early stages of fasting in phase 1, it has to do that because there's no ketones. Then you get into phase 2, which is sort of what I consider the Goldilocks zone, where you're having ketones provide a bulk of the energy. You're now in what they call protein sparing mode. And this is where a lot of the benefits happen with minimal risk for generally healthy people. And depending on who you are, you can live in phase 2 from anywhere from 7 to about 28 days and be okay as long as you're getting adequate water and electrolytes. Then you get into phase 3, and that's the danger zone. But because we don't know which person you are, whether you're closer to the 7 days or closer to the 28, we stick to about 5 days. One of the main reasons is it's a good balance between the benefits and any potential risks for generally healthy people. There are other benefits too, and we'll talk about why it's 5 days, but that's one of the reasons. A lot of great stuff happens with water fasting. So if you look at this chart, you'll see a couple different things. We know that neuroplasticity, or how the brain works, improves. Cognitive performance can improve during fasting. We also know that in your heart, you're going to increase your parasympathetic tone, which is the opposite of fight or flight. It's the rest and recover state. Heart rate is going to go down. Blood pressure is going to go down. Heart rate variability, which is a marker for recovery, is going to go up. You're also going to get a decreased body temperature because of this. Because of this parasympathetic tone, body temperature goes down. So many people feel cold during fasting, and that can be very normal. It could also be related to dehydration. So you want to make sure people are well hydrated. But that is a common thing we see during fasting. Some of the other things that occur, though, that we really focus on are these nutrient sensing pathways that we'll talk about more in the coming slides. IGF-1, or insulin-like growth factor 1 in the liver, and mTOR, or mechanistic target of rapamycin. These both go down. And when they go down, they tell your cells that the food that you were consuming is not present anymore. You don't have enough energy from your food. So something has to change. And this triggers the cells to go into a stress-resistant state, and eventually activating autophagy, or autophagy, which is the cellular cleanup that we really look for during prolonged fasting or fasting mimicking diet. So we'll talk extensively about that coming up. So there's lots of benefits to water-only fasting for a couple days. But here's specifically how it triggers, and we'll walk through this a little carefully. Your body recognizes food through a number of nutrient sensing pathways. This is how you know what you ate. So for example, if you eat carbs, you're going to activate protein kinase A over here. If you eat protein, you're going to trigger IGF-1. And this is sort of the master switch, insulin-like growth factor 1. It's the thing that we focus most of our research on at Dr. Valter Longo's laboratory. It's a lot of evidence around the world is showing this is one of the master main switches for growth and aging is IGF-1. So protein is probably the strongest driver of how this works. And then amino acids and insulin, so carbs and protein, both trigger mTOR, or mechanistic target of rapamycin. And for those of you who have done our diet, you know that we limit caffeine. We limit caffeine because adenylate cyclase right here interacts with caffeine. So if you drink too much caffeine, more than about a cup of coffee or about 90 milligrams of caffeine, you can start to reactivate protein kinase A. So that's the reason we limit it, just for those who are curious. But just to view what we just talked about a different way, if you eat traditional food that has sugar, carbs, and protein in the normal amounts, you're going to trigger IGF-1 through the protein, mTOR through protein and sugar, and then pKa through sugar and carbs, and that's going to lead to growth. That's why we eat, is to help grow, to help sustain the growth activities of the body. But when you think about what growth is, in many ways, it really is just rapid aging. As you grow, you divide cells more quickly. That creates metabolic and DNA errors. You are accumulating, as you ramp up your metabolism through growth, you're accumulating intracellular damage. You're wearing out your mitochondria, which are the powerhouses of the cell. The proteins that inside your cells act as signal carriers also can get damaged or misfolded, and they stop doing their job. And they just sit there and they float around, muddying up the water inside your cells, making it harder to do the cell's job and functioning more poorly. But as long as you have enough energy coming in, you're never going to trigger the cell to clean that up because it's got extra resources. It doesn't have to worry that things aren't progressing as efficiently as they could. So all of those things contribute to aging. Another thing is as you grow, once you reach peak height, you're no longer going to grow up, you're only going to grow out. For every gram of protein you eat, about 2/3 of it can be turned into fat, cholesterol, and other things. So it's not all going to muscle. So what you eat leads to a lot of growth, including aging. And if you trigger the fasting mechanisms through a couple days of nutrient restriction, you turn off IGF-1, mTOR, and pKa signaling, you trigger stress resistance, and you activate autophagy. And it is this cycle that we think of as sort of healthy aging, where you eat your normal food, and then every now and then you do several days of fasting or fasting mimicking diet to get that cellular cleanup. And specifically what we're trying to trigger is this, autophagy. So autophagy or autophagy literally translates to self-eating, autophagy. It's your body's natural cellular cleanup process where it gets rid of old and worn out intracellular organelles, misfolded proteins. It's sort of a recycling and cleaning house mechanism, but it's really only triggered through a couple things. When you're sick, this is actually how your cells get rid of the intracellular pathogens. So viral and bacterial particles that get into your cells get cleaned out through autophagy. So it plays a vital role in immune function and in inflammation, but it's also the key to cellular rejuvenation. Unfortunately, it is really only triggered in humans. There's very little evidence that autophagy occurs before about 24 hours. And it usually peaks around 48 to 72 hours, which is day 2 to 3 of a fast. So if you're just fasting for 16 hours, you're not going to be triggering autophagy. Or if you are, you're just barely getting into it. You really need to do several sustained, continuous days of fasting to get the full cleanup, unfortunately. So that's one of the other main reasons why we are 5 days long, is because that's how long it takes for this process to occur. After 5 days, there isn't a whole lot of evidence that you're going to be getting beneficial autophagy. So that's why we stop at 5 days, is we think it's a good balance of benefits and safety. And this is such an important pathway, but it's really only recently been understood. The team that figured it out just about a decade ago won the Nobel Prize shortly thereafter. So this is a really new understanding in humans. We knew that it occurred, but we didn't know how it occurred until very recently. So because of that, not all fasting is equal. If you look over here on time-restricted eating, which is the most common kind, which we are big fans of, we think everyone should be doing a time-restricted eating every day. Dr. Longo and all of his researchers agree. You're not going to be getting that cellular cleanup if you're staying in the intermittent fasting category. You really have to come over to prolonged fasting to get there. So more than 2 days to even really trigger it, and then several more days to get that benefit. So the only way to do this is with either water fasting or fasting mimicking diets. So the next question we get is, well, why wouldn't I just do water fasting? And this is a question for everyone. I'm not sure, Kim, if you've told me before. Have you tried water fasting? And if so, how long have you made it? I'll tell you candidly, the longest I've ever made it is about 24 hours. The biggest challenge with water fasting is that it's extremely difficult to do. So adherence is the number one problem. 90 to 95% of people in some studies drop out after day 1 at the end of 24 hours, which is why the main reason why we exist is people can't get through a water fast. We've been trying to do it in research and people keep quitting, and the FDA or all of the investigational review boards have said, if we want to attempt a prolonged fast, you need to hospitalize people because there is also a safety risk. When you go several days without solid food, a number of things happen. Number one, you get about 40% of your water from your food itself. So even if you're drinking plenty of water, you're removing 40% of the other water you were getting in the solid food. So dehydration is very common. And in addition to no lower water intake, you also have lower salt and other electrolytes, which would help you hold on to that water. So dehydration becomes a big issue. And because you're not eating any fat, you're not mobilizing your gallbladder. Your bile in your gallbladder coats fat. So gallstones seem to be at an increased risk in some studies. You also can get, because of the dehydration, you can get low blood pressure. You're also not getting any energy. So for certain people, they may become hypoglycemic. You're going to be cannibalizing muscle tissue early on while you're looking for some energy. And you're also just going to be very hungry. So there are a lot of downsides to water fasting. So what do we do? Well, enter Dr. Longo. He is the head of the Longevity Institute here at the University of Southern California's Leonard Davis School of Anti-Aging Medicine. He's also one of the world's leading longevity researchers. He's got a professorship in Italy. And he has focused most of his research on looking at the longest living, healthiest people on Earth, the so-called blue zones: Sardinia, Italy; Nicoya, Costa Rica; Loma Linda, California; and Okinawa, Japan. And what he discovered, so most of them eat a Mediterranean-style diet that is low in protein. They live very low-stress lives. Their jobs tend to be things like herding sheep or fishing. They spend a lot of time in community. They drink locally grown red wines. So they just have very low oxidation states and very slow aging. But there's one group that doesn't do any of that. In Loran, Ecuador, there's a group that lives a very Western lifestyle. They drink, they smoke, they eat red meat, and everyone around them gets the same age-related diseases that we do here in the US. But this group called the Laron, L-A-R-O-N, does not get cancer, diabetes, or heart disease. They're essentially immune to those. These are commonly associated with aging. These are diseases in America that occur much more commonly after age 55. But these people are also about 3 feet tall. Hidden in their DNA is the secret, the aha moment to what we do here, and that is they have a mutation in that IGF-1 pathway, or insulin-like growth factor 1. This is the thing that triggers growth in bodybuilders when they eat protein. It's why you work out. When you release IGF-1 from your muscles, it'll build more muscle. So they have no IGF-1 response to protein. So they stop growing at about 3 feet tall, no matter what they eat. But they also don't get these diseases that we generally think of as age-related diseases. Well, now we know that they're probably not age-related, they're growth-related, because if you block IGF-1, they don't happen. We also know that IGF-1 responds to protein. And since protein is in food, we now have a direct observational evidence that what you eat in the form of proteins, what macronutrients you eat, directly impacts how you grow and age, and potentially even how your risk factors for age-related disease. So that's where we spent the next 20 plus years. And at this point, over $48 million in federally funded research is to try to figure out how to take advantage of that nutrient sensing pathway we've now identified and how that can translate into benefits for the rest of us. So that's where Prolon came from. Prolon is a 5-day meal program with breakfast, lunch, dinner in the form of Mediterranean style soups, breakfast bars, snacks, drinks, dessert in some days, designed to give you the same trigger at that nutrient sensing pathways to keep your cells in a fasting state while still smuggling food in. So the question is, how do we do that? So this is kind of the final component to understanding how all this works. How am I able to mimic that cellular signal with fasting, but still give you food? So if you eat normal food, you ramp up your nutrient sensing pathways, you grow your cells, so you make a lot of cells, you grow very well, but you'll notice that they stay old and worn out. If you fast, you get below this line into the cellular cleanup state, and you clean up inside the cells. But you'll notice to get under that, you didn't have to go all the way to the bottom like fasting. There's actually a little bit of wiggle room here. You can just get below this line. And what Dr. Longo and his team figured out is, where is that line? How much protein can I smuggle into you and stay under that line? How much fat, how much carbohydrates, how much fiber, etc. And if we combine all of those macronutrients in a very specific way, the right amount, ratio, and design, I can give you up to 800 calories a day and keep your cells in the cleanup state, but still feed your body. And that's exactly what this is. It's got very carefully designed and tested micronutrient and macronutrient ratios to deliver the most nutrition possible and still get you those benefits in a relatively safe way. And specifically what it is it's about 10% protein, about 45% fats, and about 45% complex carbs and fiber. We actually give you quite a bit of glucose, but we do it in a very specific way, and I'll show you in a moment. So part 1 is the ratio, 10, 45, 45. Part 2 is the amount. It's about 1,130 calories on day 1, and then it eases you into day 2 through 5 and drops down to about 800 calories, a little bit less, 770 calories on day 2 through 5. So ratio and amount matter, but just as important is the design. So for example, this L bar we give you every day, we recommend it for breakfast, but you can eat it whenever you want. Each day, it has about 8 grams of honey. If I gave you 8 grams of honey, you would not be in a fast. But if I give you that 8 grams emulsified in a high amount of nut oils from macadamia nut and coconut, and a significant amount of plant-based fibers like inulin, that will lower the glycemic load and index, delay the absorption inside your body, and deliver more of a time-released energy so that we never spike your insulin, we never kick you out of a fasting state. And all of the foods in the diet have been designed that way. The soups have a little bit of simple starches to dehydrate the olive oil in them, and you get a transient spike, but it's short enough that it doesn't impact the fasting state at a cellular level. So all of this has been carefully studied to help keep your body in a fasting state while delivering as much macronutrients as possible. We also do something really clever with the L drink on day 2 through 5. So I mentioned that in early stages of fasting, while your body is going into a fasting state, it still is going to be waiting for ketones. And in the interim, it's going to eat glycerin, glycogen, and amino acids. Your liver, it has some glycerin and glycogen. Your muscles are full of glycogen, and they are made out of amino acids. So you're actually going to lose a lot of muscle mass early in a fast. But If I give you more glycerin, you'll eat less amino acids. So while the diet from a food standpoint is one size fits all, we don't care about preserving the fat of larger people, but we do want to preserve their muscle. So larger people are going to get more of the L drink, which is that glycerin suspended in water, and that's going to be delivering them additional energy to help preserve their lean body mass. So one of the ways we account for larger people is with that L drink. We don't give it to you on day one because glycerin is pretty cool. It's what's called a sugar alcohol. You cannot metabolize it. You can't absorb it when you're not in a fasting state. Your kidneys will just filter it right out. So we don't give you on day one because you're not in a fasting state. It's actually used as a diet sweetener in a lot of products because you can't digest it. Once you're in a fasting state, your body can now use it in the Krebs cycle to make energy. So if I give you more L drink on day 2 through 5, you can metabolize it and you can use it for energy, but it doesn't spike your insulin the way sugar would. So it's not treated like a true sugar. So it's almost a stealth energy source. So we take advantage of the complex biochemistry of how humans work to give you the most food possible while still keeping you in that fasting state. We have 2 different varieties. We have the original, which is Mediterranean soup flavors, and the new version, which is butternut squash, quinoa, white bean, spinach, black bean. So it's more of an umami kind of palette. So user preference, they do exactly the same thing. They have the exact same macronutrients. So the effect should be the same overall. It's just a flavor preference. So how it works. Day 1 just eases you in. Day 2 and 3, if you're going to have trouble, those tend to be the difficult days as your body is transitioning into a fasting state, especially the first or second time you do it. Your body still has to get used to it. And it will potentially have the most common side effects are headache, fatigue, and weakness. They usually go away on their own after about 12 to 24 hours. But day 2 and 3 tend to be the challenging days. Day 4, people typically aren't even hungry anymore. The cleanup really happens around day 3, 4, 5 intracellularly. Day 4 and 5, people may start to feel a little more bright, a little more energy. Hopefully by the end, they feel that cellular cleanup really on a systemic level. They have a boost in energy, mental clarity, and focus, things like that. So generally people can tell that the diet worked, but not everybody, especially if you've done it a couple times. But so anyway, day 6 and beyond, we give you a transition diet recommendation, but ultimately it's up to you. I'm going to skip this slide. So let's pause for a moment. I want to switch gears. Now I want to talk a little bit about the clinical research. So the first portion has been talking a little bit about how this works. Now we're going to stop and we're going to go over to the science and clinical application. All right, hopefully, I apologize. Can somebody please let me know? Can you see my slides in the chat? I want to make sure I'm on the correct one now.
Yes, we're able to see your screen.
I'm on the correct one. Good. Okay, just want to make sure. All right, so I'm going to demonstrate our clinical trials looking at generally healthy people for teaching purposes. Again, this is not designed to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. But so a little bit about the science, because we put a lot of scientific effort behind what we do. So the trial that we're going to talk about is 3 cycles of Prolon, or 3 cycles of fasting mimicking diet, I should say, done once per month for 3 months in a row. So 5 days each month. And then people in the trials lived their traditional, generally healthy lives. They did not change their diets or exercise between cycles of FMD or afterwards. So this is basically looking at 5 days of fasting mimicking diet versus regular everyday life. And over those 3 cycles done over a period of 3 months and then tracked for 3 months afterwards, we showed that there was a fairly significant impact on a number of biomarkers. So just 15 days of fasting mimicking diet spread over 3 months led to a significant amount of weight loss, about 5.7 pounds, which I apologize, I think it's 2.2 kilograms, somewhere in that neighborhood, an improvement in BMI. But more importantly, one of the things that people frequently forget about weight loss is that if you do a chronic caloric restrictive diet, you're not just losing fat, you're losing everything. We showed in our trial that people maintain their lean body mass and almost all of the weight they lose is trunk fat. So primarily the visceral fat, the bad fat that surrounds the organs. Great, thank you. I'm glad you guys do pounds as well. the bad fat that surrounds your organs tends to be preferentially lost. In even just one cycle, people lose about 1 inch off their waist, and cumulatively they sustain about 1.6 inches off their waist. So, and again, I apologize if you do centimeters. I'm not going to bother converting on the fly here, but it's a pretty significant change in a very short period of time. So targeted weight loss in the section you want to lose while preserving lean body mass is really the main focus. So, and we show that we do that very well, but there are also impacts on a number of other markers, including IGF-1, which, as we noted, is a marker for how we age. So we help maintain healthy levels of that to support healthy aging, as well as healthy levels of systolic blood pressure to help support metabolic balance. In the clinical trials, this is what we demonstrated. We also showed in the clinical trial population that it's not associated with a dangerous drop in biomarkers. So let me break this down because it looks a little daunting. So in the category of people in the trials who had a fasting blood glucose of over 99, over those 3 cycles, they had a reduction of almost 12 milligrams per deciliter. And again, small sample size, we're not making any claims on that. But what we do know is that if you are in the healthy fasting blood glucose range, this is not associated with a significant drop. So the body knows what healthy looks like and it stays there. Same with systolic blood pressure. While the people who had over 120 millimeters mercury in the hypertensive category had a significant drop, again, small number, we're not making a claim, the people in the normal category with a healthy systolic blood pressure did not experience hypotension. Same with the diastolic blood pressure, no hypotension was seen. And we see this across the board with biomarkers. If you're in the normal healthy range, we help you maintain that healthy level. So it's not associated with a drop in the generally healthy population in our trials. This is a little confusing. I'll break this down too. If you look at people several months after they finished the diet, we measure people almost 4 months later. So towards the end of the 3rd month, after those 3 initial cycles, without any other lifestyle changes, they still had 55 to 71% of the observed benefits without any other changes. So weight, for example, they still had about 2/3 of the weight loss sustained almost 4 months after they stopped. And remember, they're only doing 15 days, 3 5-day cycles. So I don't know of any other intervention I can give you where if I stop the intervention, 4 months later, you still have 2/3 of the benefits. So this is a pretty powerful tool, especially given that you're only doing it for 5 days each month. So we're showing that we can have more sustained results if you do it multiple cycles. So one of the main reasons we encourage people to do 3 cycles is you get into a quote unquote fasting shape. Your body learns how to appropriately switch in and out of a fasting state. The results are sustained to a much greater level for a much longer period of time if you do multiple cycles. So we really encourage people to stick to those multiple cycles. It's also easier each time if you do that. So while we do observe headache, fatigue, and weakness at a mild level in several people early on, with repeated cycles, it gets less common and less severe. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some medications that we are a little bit concerned about because, again, all of our trials to date that we're talking about here have been on generally healthy people. So we don't have any medication trials. If you plan to use this with anyone with a medication, we encourage you, 1, use your clinical judgment and practice within the scope of your license to determine whether somebody is healthy enough to do the diet. If they're on a medication that needs monitoring and adjusting and you're not their prescribing clinician, speak with the prescribing clinician, have them give their recommendations, work with the patient and their doctor, or don't use the product on them. We want everyone to be safe. So we depend on your clinical judgment to keep our customer and your patient safe. So I would highlight that the biggest concerns we have, and again, we don't have any data, these are just kind of what we've heard in the field. Hypoglycemia, if they're on something like insulin, we don't recommend this diet at all. If they're on other sugar modifying agents like metformin, for example, we don't have any data. Some people elect to hold the metformin about 5 to 7 days ahead of time. But again, monitoring and adjusting is key. So if they're on something that adjusts their sugar, this diet can lower blood sugar as well. We want them to be safe. Please monitor and adjust accordingly. Same with blood pressure medications that are diuretic, like Lasix or hydrochlorothiazide. We don't want people to become hypotensive by losing too much water. So monitor, adjust again. And then lastly, just for, not for safety purposes, just for good outcomes, anything that adjusts male sex hormones or growth hormones is maybe potentially going to have an impact on how well the body cleans itself up during fasting. So if they're on a thyroid medicine that's new and they haven't quite adapted to it yet, or they're on a new dose of a male sex hormone like testosterone, or they are on a steroid or something like that. You want to make sure that they have adjusted and they're stable on whatever medication they're on prior to attempting this, or they may not get the full cleanup. There are some medications that appear to be safe. Again, we haven't done the studies. Statins don't appear to interfere with fasting in any way. So any of the cholesterol statins, aspirin or other NSAIDs, paracetamol, Aleve, those naproxen, all of those seem to be okay. Acid pump inhibitors for reflux, as well as over-the-counter non-drowsy allergy medicines don't appear to interfere with the diet in any way. There are a number of things that we want people to do to stay safe on the diet. Chief among them is to hydrate well. We want to make sure that everybody gets enough hydration. Now, how much water that is depends on how much you normally drink. So if you normally drink quite a bit of water, you may need to drink even more, depending on also your salt intake. So we want everyone to drink at least 32 fluid ounces, which is one of the water bottles that we include in the diet each day. But ultimately, it's up to you to determine what the right amount is. If you are feeling lightheaded, don't get in a car. Sit down, drink some of the L drink. If you are really struggling, you can have a bite of the L bar, or potentially, in rare circumstances, if you need it, you could have 2 slices of an apple. We want people to be okay. 2 slices of a small apple, I should say. We want people to exercise carefully. So we want you to be active, brisk walking, gentle yoga, stretching, but how hard you work out depends on a lot of things. So we tell people to take it easy during the diet. Don't overexert yourself. We also want you to avoid significant hot or cold temperatures, like a jacuzzi or sauna, for example, because these may make you more lightheaded on the diet. So let me switch back over to some tips and tricks for the utilization of Prolon, but thank you for bearing with me on that. So, all right. All right. Hopefully everyone can still see the correct screen. If somebody would please let me know. Is the tips and precautions slide showing?
Yes, looks great.
Thank you. So, who is Prolon for? Again, this is designed for weight loss, healthy aging support, and metabolic balance support as part of a healthy lifestyle. There are a number of people who should not use the diet. If you're pregnant or breastfeeding or under 18, these are all ages where we want you to grow or grow someone else. So if you do something that restricts growth, it may impact that. So we don't recommend this. We don't have great safety data on those, and we don't have great evidence showing that it works in the pediatric population either. If you're allergic to anything in the diet, especially nuts, about 40% of the diet has nuts in it, and we don't have any ability to change at this point. All of our research has been conducted with nuts. If your BMI is under 18.5, you need to have enough body mass to do well on the diet, because it does use your body's own fat for a number of parts of the diet. So if you don't have enough visceral fat or other fat, it's going to potentially eat something important, and we don't want to do that. We also don't want to contribute to any suspected eating disorder. So if they have anything like that, please avoid the diet, because fasting may impact that adversely. If you have diabetes, cancer, congestive heart failure, or a history of fainting, we do not recommend this diet, especially with insulin-dependent diabetes. We are doing research with a different product and cancer, and we may have future products or recommendations that change, but at the moment, we're very careful about these. We want to make sure we keep everyone safe. Additionally, if you have an infection, we recommend that you wait at least 15 days till you finish after any treatment for the infection or all symptoms have resolved. And now a statement about COVID. No one has done any studies around COVID and diet changes during COVID. So if you're actively infected with COVID or have recently had it, we recommend that you don't do the diet. You check with your clinician before you start. We want to make sure that anyone in the high risk categories is very careful about this. So if you're over 65 right now, we currently don't recommend you do the diet given COVID, but that's ultimately up to you as a practitioner. And the vaccine, nobody's done any studies around the diet and vaccines either. So we don't know what impact that may have. So if you want to evaluate somebody, if they've recently gotten the vaccine or about to get the COVID vaccine, and you elect to wait maybe 18 to 30 days after they finish the vaccine before starting the diet, we would understand that as well, just to steer clear of anything. Again, no evidence for or against the use. We just want to be careful. A little bit about the experience. we're just about done, so thank you guys for your patience. There are a number of things that occur with any type of fasting: hunger, headache, fatigue. These can even occur with ketogenic diets, but we do see them on our diet as well. The most common are those top three: hunger, headache, and fatigue. Difficulty concentrating, if you're going to get that, it's usually on day 2 or 3 as your body's transitioning. Same with the feeling of coldness. Again, maybe just related to going into a fasting state, may also be dehydration. So make sure you get plenty of water. And then finally, rarely the headache can be accompanied by nausea. It's just something that happens. It's pretty rare, but it can happen. It's not an allergy to the food typically. It's usually just that's what your body's doing while it's going into a fasting state. Some may elect to discontinue the diet. That's okay. It's up to them, but it can be normal. So we want people to stay active and rest well, but again, make sure you're adequately hydrating. If you're really struggling, you can have a cup of coffee per day, or 2 cups of black or green tea, or 6 cups of decaf. And I think we'll review that again in another slide here. But I encourage people to have their caffeine if they're really struggling. We don't want them to suffer too much on the diet. And if you need over-the-counter meds like paracetamol, Aleve, Tylenol, etc., those are okay. So I showed you the clinical trial results. I want to talk about why I do the diet. So I'm from, well, I'll just say I don't eat the best diet usually, and I have a lot of cravings, and I notice that I also have some significant brain fog. When I do the diet for several weeks to months afterwards, I am much more able to adopt a healthier diet. My brain fog is gone. I have much more energy. So I know that myself, that's why I do it. We've done a survey of thousands of our customers after just 1 cycle. So this isn't based on 3 cycles, just 1. And we asked them, how do you feel? And overwhelmingly, they responded, it's much easier to make healthy choices on our diet. They have greater energy, mental clarity, and focus. They have better portion control. They're able to resist sugary foods better. So a lot of great behavioral stuff. Let me see. I think we're missing a slide here. Yeah, we're missing the one on portion control. So I use it for the behavioral benefits. It's a great mental reset, especially as we all come out of hibernation now and get back into life. If you need a little kickstart to get back into healthy habits, this is a great tool for that. So if you use it for nothing else other than to help adopt a healthier diet, so moving forward, if they're having trouble adjusting to a Mediterranean style diet, for example, and you just want to remodulate their palate, this is a great way to do that. So there are a couple tips and tricks we can do to the diet to make it a better experience for everybody. You can have any herbal tea you want, as long as it's unsweetened and caffeine free. We do include quite a bit of herbal teas, but you can bring in your own. You can chew 2 pieces of sugar-free gum per day. You can have 2 slices of lemon. Don't eat them, just use them for flavoring. If you use them in tea, for example, you can have a teaspoon of sea salt, as long as you don't have any health and contraindications like blood pressure issues. You can add a tablespoon of dried herbs and spices per day to enhance flavor. Example, like red pepper flakes. You can add any sparkling water you want, as long as there are no sweeteners. And then again, you can have up to 90 milligrams of caffeine per day, which is 1 8-ounce cup of coffee, or 2 cups of 8-ounce cups of black or green tea, or 6 cups of decaf. So don't try and cheat this. We're not trying to undo the benefit of the diet. So we do encourage everybody to try it for themselves. I know you have, so I think you'll be okay. But we want you to have a personalized approach to everybody. We do recommend that you do the 3 cycles. And the nice thing about that is it also gives you a natural touch point with the patient. So before the 1st and after the 3rd cycle, you can bring them in, do any evaluations you want to do with them. So it drives a better patient relationship as well. If you help coach them through it, it tends to be a more intimate experience. We do offer a number of support options. So you can sign up in the US, and I apologize, I don't know if we do this everywhere. I think we do. You can receive texts every day on the diet telling you what's happening inside your body each day, and giving you some encouragement. We can also send emails to your patients each day to encourage them to keep going, as well as a number of other support materials. We have marketing and education materials we can give you. You have access to our medical education team. We're a growing team, but we're here to support you. And yeah, so if you have any questions, please reach out to us about that. The diet does a lot of different stuff, but it's really not the diet. It's really your own cells that are the benefits. So because fasting affects every cell in the body, you're going to get a lot of benefits, it's a nice thing because we don't have to worry about blocking a pathway and hoping for a result. we're triggering a natural cascade that your body has evolved to take advantage of. So because of that, this has a number of beneficial mechanisms. We do encourage people to discontinue supplements during the diet. We include supplements in our diet, and a lot of supplements have things like amino acids in them that may actually count as nutrition. So we don't want anything to interfere with the diet. You can generally go without supplements for 5 days. So we encourage people to discontinue them. But if you're on something like a thyroid support supplement and you want to continue that, we understand that. So thank you so much for your time and attention. I'm going to go ahead and open it up to questions, but I really appreciate everyone's focus, and we look forward to supporting you and your patients during the diet.